Jetzt läuft es.
Hello, I'm Benking from Berlin. I'm very happy to be invited to the Gebser conference in New York, and as we couldn't do a web conference, I would like to make a short virtual presentation. I call it Some Constructions because the main title, Concreteness in Integral Worlds, I've been presenting with the Gebser Society already in 2001. Unfortunately, it was directly after September 11, so we had to publish 2 years later, and I published the article I did with Sherryl also on my website with some visualizations from the Konrad Lorenz Institute of Evolution and Cognition Research. And I want to show here what we can do as concrete constructions on the basis of what we presented 16 years ago. So don't follow up all the line works and all the presentations, but just follow some images and maybe we have some food for thought for later. So I presented this as a video conference. So here you see me in my back office, my little home studio. So you have a better idea. And the main theme of our presentation here today is the glut, the information flood, that we are really drowned in multimedia information and we lost our overview and our orientation. So when I look into my office, I see my left computer with tons of slides, and the chance is to really allow you to dig deeper but maintain the overview. We'll try to do that, but we also will cover a lot of images, so please fasten seatbelts. What I did with Otto Sherryl in 1999, Otto Sherryl was the former president of the Gebser Society and was a friend of Gebser. What I did with him in 1999 was speaking and making a workshop at the European Forum of Freedom in Education, alternative schools, Waldorf schools, any kind of alternative learning, on what really this intrusion of media, and not just different times and different realities and cultures, is doing onto us. How cyberculture is endangering us to really dump us down. So I want to show here a little bit how I came to know Otto Sherryl, give a little bit background of this extraordinary man. He was visiting me at the university in Ulm in the early 90s, as he has heard about my work on virtual reality, on cyberculture, a humane information society. That was a project with the European Commission at that time. And he was coming from a Hugo Kückelhaus Society event. And when he saw my work on information, he was drawing these visualizations showing where he sees in my cognitive model worlds a place for the syneresis. But this is all too deep at the moment. This you will better understand in the end of the presentation. I just need to say that Otto Sherryl, I cannot say disciple, but as a younger friend, was following people he could learn from. And it was not just Gebser, whom he learned about in the mid-50s when he was a year in hospital and really had time to really go deep into the work of Gebser. And later, I think 15 years later, he was traveling a lot with another architect. Otto was the head of the art university or art school in Lucerne in Switzerland, and he was practicing as an architect, building cloisters, building kindergartens, being really putting the thinking of aesthetics, of order, of the integral into living building structures. And he followed also in this way Otto Kückelhaus, who with his census ways, which he first presented in the German Pavilion 69 in Montreal at the World Exhibition Expo, and he gave rise to the Exploratorium in San Francisco. What they were thinking about how we can support this breaking in of time into our living world, and how we could, through buildings, through aesthetical structures, can really build something different or more humane. And he was with people like who were in the friendship circle of Gebser, like Sharon, who was building the Philharmonie, to really look into alternative, perspective realities, models and build structures. So this is what we did with Otto. He really showed that we can construct also mental environments like models and immerse and not speak only about symbols but about fields of knowledge, and so we can connect something which is presented in different cultures in different ways with different intentions. I myself was first brought to the work of Jean Gebser through Alfred Schintz, the head of the building of the Philharmonie in Berlin, and who became my boss in the mid-70s, who had the Wintermärchen, the book of Gebser and all this with him when we were working in Arabia. And I saw there in the second volume his Gebser's synchron optical grid. And I was fascinated because it looked simple, coherent, complete, and it was really meaning-making. So I was deeply impressed, but I didn't follow up of that in the late 70s. I worked on such schemas or grids and looked very much at the work done by the UIA, Union of International Associations, and the United Nations University in Tokyo in the preparations of Rio 92, how to create a grid showing the intersectorial strategic dilemmas, how issues are connected, and this is what I'm doing now. I'm retired. I work with the Common Actions Caucus in the United Nations ECOSOC, that's the NGO's caucus part of supporting and writing recommendations in the UN systems. So I can later speak about the SDGs and what should be done there, but only this as a personal note. I'm technician and engineer, and being a surveyor, I like maps and models and grids, but I don't see them as walls, but as geographic coordinates. So I will try in this presentation to show you where I'm from, where I'm based on, why, my motivation, my objectives, and where this might lead in common constructions. So when Otto Sherryl was visiting me in the early 90s, we already were thinking about the puzzle, about the chaos, and what kind of narratives and metaphors we use, and how we watch our ways we use words, symbols, icons, and how we need to reflect order, orientation, sense-making, and how different cultures have different narratives. Like some people say, this information crisis makes us, imprisons us, or it's like a show, or is a labyrinth, a bomb blowing up into our world, or a sweet pie. So it might be very, very appealing, but many culture theorists, people say it's a modern flood. This is a final flood where we are overwhelmed and dumbed down by information we cannot see in context and we do not understand. So Otto liked my work there, and this is some puzzle solving and meaning making works and presentations in the process before and after Rio 92. So I discussed with him the need for a global covenant, the need to go beyond silos and reflect what is the internet now, as we can see it presently. Already 93 in the Information Strategy magazine, they spoke about magnetic portals. So we have in-groups, they have their turf. It's like what we call now filter bubbles. It's an echo chamber where we are on a level of tribalization. We are brought down to groups of people on the same level, not realizing what the others are. So with all this doomsday thinking, we discussed with an architect, and this was Otto Sherryl, beside his work for the arts education, was really, what can we do? Can we create maps and models for cyberspace? So we share information and their context and not have all in sweet isolation. Before I go into practical things, I would like to tell you I'm a journalist, and so I'm looking always into how to write and to whom to address things. And I took this old typewriter, brought it to my garden to show that we have different character sets and they are limited. And we have different sign sets and different systems and even different frames. You see on the piece of paper when I write with a typewriter, I set a frame of references. And everything is what is outside of the frame is ignored or not even realized that it is there. And the first thing I got from Gebser in my hand is the winter poem from 44, where Gebser, like Novalis, was saying all these words we use are just labels. They are not the reality. So I can translate later. No, I can translate that with giving a name to every word, we are hiding a part of reality. And definitely, like a map is not the territory, is the naming not giving us a direct access to reality. It is just a very shallow first approach. So I'm still in the where and why. So bear with me and maybe drink a glass of water. Where's my water? Okay, I'll continue. What I want to tell you, to really give you some bearing, what I'm trying to present here is what I mean by order schemas. When I was in the 70s or 80s in California, I found these maps, these schemas, like form constants, mapped by a cartographer of consciousness, Brian Horst, in the Omni magazine, making near-death experiences or experiments with psychedelic drugs where people have been set into situations where they're in the beginning maybe just saw a flat plane. But when they were more and more away, they were all reporting about a cobweb and then a tunnel which they've been sucked in, and if they died or near death, they were reporting about a spiral which was throwing them away out of reality and never coming back, maybe towards the further next life. So this is very important for me. Such presentations are not the reality. They are not schemas. They are not scaffoldings. They are just a way to present beyond words and images. The next very important point I want to make in this presentation is we need multimodal approaches, not different science systems, different media, but also different granularity. So we need to see with our eyes, but also with the microscope and the macroscope. And I took this picture to show you that we can be in the maze, but we can also take on a bird's eye and take our viewpoint eye out or look from another angle. Also, before I go to the examples, is I'm the secretary of Tagore Einstein Council, and I mentioned here a lot of names where I learned from since I worked on these constructions I'm presenting here in the late 80s. Is I want to not only mention names on the way which were important for the development, like Eric Jansch or Elinor Ostrom, but two architects, Otto Czerny and Alfred Schintz, and Herbert Stachowiak, something like a model systems theory pioneer, and who was also working on 5 volumes on pragmatics. I'll come to that a little later, but now let me go what Gebser is for me. He is trying to include and to transcend and finding a very innovative, very special language. And he's speaking about the transcendent, the translucent, the transparent. And I've been taking out pictures to show that we need some icons, some images to really show and communicate to others. And the idea to have a crystal ball or a transparent ball is very much discussed in the German or European Jean Gebser society scene. This is a new book on what it means, what Gebser has done to society and democracy and politics. And I find this icons, like Ikone in the Russian Orthodox school, a very, very nice, deep, tangible metaphor. And I took here pictures of icons like amber, which show something in between, which is hidden and maybe lurking through, or take the earth as a symbol for Mother Earth, of something fragile and relevant and even living maybe. And as I discussed with Otto Czerny, there is a Paul Schatz There's a Paul Schatz Foundation now in Switzerland. He created some merging and morphing of objects. So one of his work was creating an oloid. An oloid is an artificial solid, like a cube, a torus, a ball. You can also merge solids, and then you create such format, which is called oloid, to really have incredible, invisible, not before imagined potentials and powers, not only in cleaning water. It is used in various practical environments nowadays, as the Paul Schatz Foundation is in Basel is pushing forward. And it is what Otto Sherryl was about, I think, in his all his life, and especially in his later years, was order and harmony. So he really took in integrally, like Jean Gebser in his theory, all these approaches, and not just of Köckelhaus and Gebser. So what I have done, and when I was visited by Otto Sherryl, I will have been creating also such transparent order spaces, and I was building it for an exhibition, and I called it Rubik's Cube of Ecology. It's a black box and white box where you can show evolutions, where you can show developments, and where you can show on the micro, meso, macro scale how things are with a microscopic or macroscopic viewpoint. Later, in 1990 or so, we called this local, regional, national, global scale. We called it glocal, and now you find it even 27 years later that some scientists write some books about it. It was a conference on futures of technology. It was with Benui Mandelbrot, a World Future Studies conference on coherence and chaos in our uncommon futures, visions, means and actions. And there I showed, and we were building first with computer graphics, such imaginary virtual reality, you would even call it, models. And I was building them. And here, just very briefly, this is Alfred Schinz, the other architect, who was building not only with Sharon the Philharmonie, but worked on as a town and state planner, I think 40 years and more, in different countries of the world, very often without maps and without ministries, very basic, original and foundational work. And his central concerns was not only writing books on the city fate of Berlin, Stadtschicksal Berlin, but cities in China or rhythmical measurement schemes and world building culture, to really show how they have building and why and what and how the inherent orders were considered by these people. And we have presented here at the German Museum in 97 the yin and yang grids in old Chinese town planning, that these old cultures have been looking very deeply not into the yin and yang or other dualism, but to think them together and in a new form of integral building and maybe more coherent societies or cultures. So Alfred Schinz wrote this in Chinese for me we are talking later about images, and we are talking about words or symbols and sign systems. And he showed me that the Chinese have another concept of many. So they say a picture has 10,000 words, and 10,000 miles you can write 10,000 books. So we have to realize that the powers of images, and images are also very dangerous, because when something has more power, it is more dangerous and can be misused. What I'm presenting in the next moments is how to link words and images and maps and models, which are sign systems, which are super signs and superstructures, to really increase the reference space. And these are the constructions we are going to. I have to skip central questions by the American Association for Politics and Life Sciences. Linton Caldwell was in Bloomington and one of the founders of the Environmental Protection Agency, a very, very broad thinking diplomat and ambassador. And he invited a couple of questions to really look into how we think, how we see, and how we present. I was invited for a little essay I called Show or Schau. And Goethe said, born to see, but to show, to do a Schau, like Weltanschauung, you have to really go deeper. In German it is zum Sehen geboren, zum Schauen bestellt. So we are talking here about like with Gebser, on very imaginative, on very wordplay approaches, trying to grasp and grope and grok and go a little bit deeper, especially in communication and conversation settings. Another very important point to really help you trying to understand what I'm aiming at here is the German concept in Enlightenment education already, or in the Enlightenment and the Renaissance, of thinking learning spaces in Enlightenment education. How they have been trying to put order, schemas, scaffoldings as a way to find something and to memorize it and even bring it together. So this Wunderkammer is reborn. I think in English you say cabinet of curiosities. And here are some examples, like we have now built in Berlin, to really make use this for museum design, but also to look into the schemas, into the orders. And I'm doing this now with virtual reality or with concrete building, like I was building this Rubik's Cube of ecology, by having a pointer to possibilities, as Anthony Judge said, by having an idea beyond the flat going to the deep. So here are examples of such Wunderkammern scaffoldings to give a place, and maybe like Leibniz's idea of the monade, show the variations in the smallest forms of natural or cultural expressions. Another thing to really try to show you what my intention is, what I have in mind here, is I look back into fields. Everybody's speaking now about patterns and not just signs and images. I found from the World Institute 50 years ago, it's a magazine, I think a journal coming out every quarter. It's called Fields Within Fields Within Fields. The next important step is as we have presented in this Knowledge magazine, that Charles Sander Peirce spoke about sign systems, and these signs are icons, symbols, and index. And this index, as a pointer in shared frames of references, is a very important way to present something. So we looked into who has used this sign systems of Charles Sander Peirce with the index, symbol, icon, and we find it in history with Cusanus or with Warburg with his libraries. And then you see it is always 3 steps on how we present. And we looked into this further with this cube in the center to give an overview and orientation schema, also showing the same levels and same meanings, but just other words, and giving, like Warburg, a 4th level for action and the integration